And now, we return you to the musical Innertube, already in progress.
What is this thing? What's this podcast?
Welcome to the musical Innertube. I'm Don Rooney.
And I'm John Timpane.
We just talk to interesting people about interesting stuff.
And now, a moment with Don Rooney and John Timpane.
Well, many of you may sit around saying, I don't know any published authors. Guess what? You really do. Because here he is, a published author, John Timpane, the co-host of the musical Innertube. And this is John's new book, Poetry for Dummies. It's right here. Everything that you need to know about poetry in the pages of this green and yellow book. John, congratulations. I understand, though, that this is not the first time that you have written Poetry for Dummies.
Well, that's part of the story here is that about 19, it's such a weird story because I'm a freelance writer. And if you're a freelance writer, you got to get used to being pretty miscellaneous. And one day, I'm minding my own business, 1999. I'm a journalist at the Inquirer, a new job. And a phone call comes from a lady, Marina Watts, who says, John, would you ever be interested in writing poetry for dummies? And I said, maybe. And she said, no, really, the dummies people, I showed them this book. And this book is a book called It Could Be Verse. I wrote this in 95, and it's a wild, whooping and swinging book about poetry.
Yay.
Hello. And, it's on the humorous, crazy side, but it really is trying to get at people's defenses and why they're there and how to lose them so you can just enjoy this beautiful thing, which is poetry. People can enjoy music and not worry about all that stuff, but for some reason, some folks feel a hesitation. Anyway, as it turned out, I did write it, and this was the first, this came out in 2000, and this was the first cover, and people came up to me and they said, that's not you. And I said, you're right.
It's right, yeah.
So, for this time, as we just saw, we have a nice, impossible photograph of a writing pen, which is writing from on top of the words, which you could do, of course. It would take some kind of
dexterity
that I really lack.
Yeah.
So anyway, I wrote it. And, we went on and, the book went off into the world and it was there for 25 years. I believe it sold out. And what I mean by that is, you get two printings of 25,000. And so I can't say it was a bestseller at any time, but, steady as she goes, I suppose. Little tiny check every once in a while, but you know what that's like here at the musical Innertube.
Yes, tiny checks. We know a lot about those.
We specialize in them. And imagine my surprise, because I had not yet recovered from the surprise last year, 2025, when a second surprise comes and they call me again. And again, it's Marina Watts. It says, John, would you want to write a second edition? So that's what it was out of the blue. So much about this book has been like that it's just sort of happened in a nice way by circumstance and coinkydink. And I enjoy doing it. 26 years, you might think that not much has changed in the poetry world, but that's the big story. A lot has, and the poetry world, like every other world, shows the impact of the digital era. And, as of 2000, I write, I try to work in the field and back in those days, if I had a poem that I wanted to send out for consideration, I type the poem. That's TYPE. There were machines that would help you make letters on paper.
Yeah,
and I would type.
Tom Hanks curates a museum about those, I think.
Oh, that's a long story that I needn't tell about Tom Hanks getting on me because I have a couple of vintage typewriters, and Tom said, "If I hear that you haven't overhauled those babies, I'm coming at you with my big stick." He really cares about typewriters.
There you go.
I miss typewriters. There's this beautiful touch thing about them. It was fun to type. And anyway, you would put it in an envelope and mail it out, and maybe you'd hear, and maybe you never would.
Yeah.
And even if you got published, you might never know. Unless no, really, you might never know. And this has happened to me 2 or 3 times where somebody says, "Oh, I saw your poem in Fuminalaga," and I go, "What?" I didn't know I was there. No,
So these poetry magazines would publish your poem without notifying you or like sending you a complimentary copy or
most of them would do something like that.
Mhm.
But there were enough times when nothing happened, I never heard, and then I found out, oh, wow, it did. To make me realize there wasn't much feedback loop. There wasn't much connection. There was 1,000 points of light in the poetry world. The poetry world has always been fun, but it wasn't very organized. There wasn't any feedback loop. There really wasn't a network. Let's put it that way.
Mm.
So in the last 26 years, a network has happened, and suddenly it's this great organized place. So poets not only have more contact with editors and publishers, but they also have more contact with each other. And so you have the birth of a couple of things. The first is what I call the poetic community, and that is a group of people. Some of these are hundreds of people strong. That it's all online, and you go to this. It's an online site. You go to the site, and you could do almost anything. You could get readers for your poems. There's something called a beta reader, which is a person you don't know who reads your poetry from a reader's viewpoint and gives you constructive criticism. And now everybody wants a beta reader. I mean, but the concept really hardly existed as of 2000. There's a little bit, but not much. Now it's a big thing. Everybody would like that. Reading groups, right, where you read together. Readings, open mics, online. And also, directories of where to send and how to send. And you get a feedback loop going where really never before have poets had one another's backs as much as, and it's not for everybody. Not everybody likes to do this, but it's now established, which means people like me, even a million-year-old guy like this, I can be an entrepreneurial poet if I choose to be, and that is if I'm getting a poem in, for example, I just got a poem in a place called the Sonneteer. I wrote a sonnet, and Ken Gordon, the wonderful editor, accepted it. So he published it, and now my job is to go out and let everybody know, as I'm doing right here, that this exists. If you want to read my poem, it's called Weathered Mahogany, and I'm just doing the entrepreneurial thing. And a lot of poets do that. They tell you, oh, I just got something published, maybe you'd like it, or I'm going to a reading, or I've just been to a reading and had a great time. So it's, they let you know about their activities. And I have a whole section on the entrepreneurial poet.
Okay.
So
and we will, being entrepreneurs ourselves, we will have a link to John's sonnet on our website.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's the kind of guys we are.
You are really nice to me, Don. You always have been.
I know.
I will tell people. So
despite the tiny checks.
Right. I mean, it's a poetry book you can use a lot of different ways. We do have a section, Introduction to Poetry. Then we have a section where I run like blazes through the 5,500 years of poetry that we possess. It goes all the way back to the Sumerians and up to the present moment. Then we have stuff about writing poetry, how you do that, how you interpret it. People are really, that's what this book was mostly about, was interpreting it. Like when you have a poem in front of you and it's like a jar of words spilled on the page, what do you do with it? And the first thing I always say is, well, forget about right and wrong. How does it hit you? Can you, I try to figure out how it hits you and why it hits you that way. And that's all I say in Poetry for Dummies is interpreting a poem should be accounting for the impact a poem has on you. What are the things in the poem that you like? Everybody's read Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening by Robert Frost. Well, what is it about that poem that moves you? And a lot of people say, well, it's the calm and the snow and the wintry scene. And we love those last lines, miles to go before I sleep, which we all have, and in many ways. And that's interpretation, and you can go to school to get sophisticated about it. I mean, I have a FUD in English, so I do interpretation of many different kinds, always have. But the main point is, why does a poem have the effect on you that it does? And that's what interpretation is about. And then we do an awful lot about how to get published, because a lot of people want to know that.
Yeah.
And so we try to cover the waterfront, plenty of poems. And another thing that's happened in 26 years, there's all these new poets who are really good. And I'm going to give a shout out right now to 3 of them because we're going to talk to them today. They're in the book, and we are going to we're going to interview them and hear what they're going to talk about. They're Mark Danowsky. He runs a poetry community called One Art, and it's just oneart.com. And we'll talk to him about, well, what's it like running one of those? Do you ever sleep? I think the answer is no. Secondly is Ernest Hilbert, who's a wonderful poet, and he's a wonderfully graceful and humane. His approach to being an entrepreneurial poet, even though he says he doesn't like the term, is really nice and very graceful. And we have that in the book. We show you his tweets when he gets something published. We show you when he's going to be part of a poetry reading, or if his friends are, he'll get a poster published and put it up analog, nailing it to telephone poles. And also, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
And
well,
also-
that's entrepreneurial. That's for sure.
no one's asking you to do it.
Yeah.
So, but Ernest
Hey, look,
is very good
this
at it.
poem is lost. Right next to the lost dogs.
And so, and the third poet that we're going to have is someone that we've talked to before on the show, Levin. Lynn, with another fine poet, Valerie Fox, has published this book, which is called Poems for the Writing, Prompts for Poets. And you can think of a prompt as kind of an exercise or an idea that will get you started into writing a poem.
Now, Poetry For Dummies is part of the For Dummies brand, it says here on the front. And I remember seeing For Dummies in bookstores. I will be honest, I think the first For Dummies book that ever caught my attention was Juggling for Dummies. And I think that's because it came with 3 soft hacky sack type balls that you could learn to juggle with that were attached to the book. That was part of the purchase.
Yep.
So did you have poems attached to this, or?
Well,
But more importantly, how important is it to be with a brand like this to get the book published and distributed?
Well, so the Dummies imprint has been around per se since 1991. It's sold more than 43 million books. So it's there are hundreds of titles, but there have been several million sellers. I think the biggest seller was DOS for Dummies back in 95. That sold like 4 million copies.
Yeah.
Now you don't need to do that, but
No, but that was when computers were new. That was vital, I think.
Oh yeah, they had COBOL for Dummies. People were, and today you have AI for Dummies. Everybody's buying that book, and the whole idea of the Dummies series is rather sort of funny. It's that the people it's aimed at are not stupid people. They're smart people who want to know more about an area that they don't feel as well versed in, like German or AI or gardening or opera or
poetry.
Yeah, so it means a lot. I'm really pleased that when I say, I wrote Poetry for Dummies, or someone else mentions that, everyone goes, oh, there's a Poetry for Dummies? You wrote that? And they never say the thing they're thinking, which is, you look like an idiot. How could you possibly write that? So it means a lot. It's an old imprint, but by the same token, it's instantly recognizable. And I'll tell you a brief story. Evidently, somebody from the press, this is back in 99, had called Lawrence Ferlinghetti, the beat poet in San Francisco, the guy who runs City Lights bookstore and all that, wonderful poet, and asked him to write the introduction.
This is to the first book.
Yes, but they never...
The first edition.
The first edition, but they never told me that they had done that. So here I am at 11 o'clock, sweating to, I'm writing the book, basically. Ring, ring. Everybody's in bed, except for me. Grab the phone before it wakes everybody up. hello, John, this is Lawrence Ferlinghetti out of the effing blue, and I'm sitting there going, okay,
Prove it.
hello.
Read
hello.
a poem.
Right. Constantly risking absurdity. That's one of his really great poems, which we actually do run in Poetry for Dummies. By the way, everybody should read his poem Dog. Just find it. You'll find it on Dog by Lawrence Ferlinghetti. Just one of the great American poems, wide open, full of verve and vinegar. So he was calling to tell me, and he says, John, he doesn't really talk like that, but John, I really like this book. It's a lot more intelligent than I thought it was going to be. Heard with, I think, relief. I think that was a compliment.
Yeah.
And he says, but I can't write your introduction. Now, this was news to me because it was news to me that Lawrence Ferlinghetti had any relationship to our book whatsoever.
There you
And
go.
he said, I can't write the introduction for a book where you have both poetry and dummies in the title because I don't think poetry is for dummies. And he immediately said, I know what you're trying to do. You don't think so either. It's not for dummies. I get that. I get what you're trying to do. So I will write you a blurb. So I think that was very generous of him.
Oh, good. Yeah.
So we have a blurb from, and still in the second edition, we're not going to not use that because he was trying to say, look, I see what you're doing. I just can't have my name on something with that combination.
Right.
And I get it. I think poetry is not for dummies. I think it's for everybody. And I hope that's what the book says.
Definitely. And one last thing that you were talking about moving forward and being part of the 2026 world as opposed to the 2000 world. So there is an online component to Poetry for Dummies. Tell us about that.
Well, there is a cheat sheet for Poetry for Dummies. It's got stuff like it's got a quiz. It's got match the place with the poet, because many poets are famous for being from a particular place, right? Robert Frost, New England, Sappho, Lesbos, and so forth and so on. Go right down the line. And there's things like that. There's also little sidebars. The book has plenty of these sidebars that are in gray boxes, and they tell little stories that are really interesting because there's so many fascinating personalities and really strange stories. I mean, so we have a gray box online, I believe, about this amazing thing called Poetry Slam 2000, which was this bus convoy taking a bunch of poets on a slam tour of the United States right around the year 2000. And I wish I'd been on that bus, is all I can say. And slam was huge then. That was when slam was really crusting. It's still really big. I mean, there's lots of slams. It's part of culture now. And so that's online, and it's just another way to extend what we're doing and to get you to have some fun and think a little bit in different ways about this lovely art form. Mark is a poet, freelance writer, mentor, and editor. He's the founder and editor-in-chief of One Art, a journal of poetry, and we hope you take a look at it sometime. It's this one-stop shop for poets. So it's a journal. You can submit poems to be published. It's got a calendar of events. It's got lists of poets we like, quote unquote, poems that we've admired recently, poems that have been here before, mentoring opportunities, reading groups, all sorts of, in other words, there's that poetic social world, which is so much stronger and more available now. People could find out where all this is. And it's a beautifully organized, very sensitive example, I think, of a poetic community. So let's talk to Mark Danowsky, editor-in-chief of One Art. We have a nice long talk in the book, you and I, about One Art. And I would like you to sort of gas for a minute about why you started it and what you hope it can do for the people who join in.
So the story is really evolved a bit over time, and I like to tell it. It's sort of the way someone asks you about a tattoo, and it's kind of more fun to make up a story than to tell the reality.
Yes.
So,
See, ladies and gentlemen, Mark thinks like a poet too. We now know that a poetry journal is like a tattoo.
So, occasionally I'll make the sort of joke that one art was sort of like, the Lord of the Rings, like the one ring to rule them all kind of thing. It's not really what I was doing, though I will say, right, famously, Jeff Bezos wanted to name Amazon Relentless. And I do feel like the relentlessness of my just how I go about things is sort of part of the operational mode of one art. Like that's why people say like, I don't know how you do what you do. And I'm like, I'm not even really sure what you're asking of me. But, part of that I know has to do with like the rapid turnaround time and just the hours I put in daily. And some of that is just kind of like a sheer kind of willpower, stubbornness, bullheadedness, you name it, that kind of thing. So there's all that. So relentlessness, sure. But, more seriously, of course, the journal's a nod to Bishop's famous villanelle. There's a few Easter eggs on the website related to that.
Yeah.
I established the journal in March of 2020, which is a notable moment, just as the pandemic got underway. And there was many reasons for why I did this, and I don't think I myself fully understood at the moment. So previously, what I would really tell people about the origin story was that I felt like I was finally mature enough to be in the editor-in-chief position. As well, I previously served for about 8 years as managing editor for the Schuylkill Valley Journal under Peter Kroc.
Right.
And then
where you and I first worked together. So I enjoyed that.
Exactly, precisely. Yeah. And then as the pandemic got underway, it happened to align with my stepping away from SVJ for various reasons. And the part that sort of came in hindsight was, tragically, so in February 25th, 2020, my mother went in for a planned surgery. And, that story sadly doesn't have a happy ending. But while my mother was in the ICU and we were under COVID lockdown, I think, clearly, unsurprisingly, I really needed something to occupy my attention that felt meaningful. And I think starting a literary journal was a big undertaking. And it gave me something to focus on and to be serious about and feel like I was part of community and creating community and, driving just sort of the things I want to do as a facilitator and steward of the arts.
That's beautifully put. I mean, I seize upon the phrase creating community because to my thinking, community is what really has changed since 2000. I mean, I like to say that in the year 2000, the poetry world was very active. There were 1,000 points of light and no system. There was no, you know what I mean? There were very few feedback loops. It was still very hard to get information compared to the way it is now. And since, I don't know, about 2015, websites not like One Art, but trying to achieve many of the same ends as One Art have popped up where poets can make community with one another, people with shared interests. You hear that all the time, that this is what the web is good at doing, of bringing people together who share things. And you certainly do, I think, a great deal of that in One Art,
Thank you.
Yeah.
So of course this is, there's pros and cons to social media, and part of the pros to socials is the digital community that we've been able to create. So certainly back in 2000, that was pre-Facebook. There wasn't anything like that. And then, Facebook didn't become what it really became until later. And then, as we know from, more recent research, like what Jonathan Haidt did in The Anxious Generation, there's a lot of talk about 2011 when Instagram really started to make an impact.
Right.
Unfortunately, a lot of that being negative. But, there are positive aspects of this
Sure.
as well. But yeah, so the internet, it does connect us. It's not the same or replacement for, in-person IRL community or engagement, but it is a space, and it is meaningful. And it's certainly very meaningful to me. And some of that comes as a surprise, because if you had asked me when I was younger, I would not have expected to grow up to be the kind of person that sort of lived much of my life online.
That's really interesting, isn't it? I guess I would have said the same thing at about the same point, that when this started, taking off, which I would think around 2005 through 2010, where people were getting used to things like Facebook and what used to be called Twitter, and then, of course, 2011 Instagram. Already there were many people said, well, this is terrible. We will never talk to each other again. And I think in many ways, some of that has happened, but in other ways, there are people, and I follow One Art, and I notice that the people who write you, they seem to be having a pretty good time. They seem to find a lot that is that feedback loop that didn't exist before. You know what I mean? Support.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, the community and the fandom they're dedicated, and they're really into it, and they're people that it's wonderful, and it makes me feel good. They write me regularly to say, I read the poems every day. This is a really meaningful part of my day, and it's valuable to me. And obviously, that's a factor that keeps me incentivized.
At the very beginning of Poetry for Dummies 2, Release the Kraken, in the introduction, I write that for many people who write poetry, it's a beloved avocation. It's something that they just need to be inside of. They need to be doing the art, and that has an inexpressible degree of meaning for them, to be in the art and working at the craft. And for many of us, that includes being with others who are doing the same thing and have the same interests. And maybe it doesn't go any further. For a lot of people, that's as far as they want it to go. But a lot of us try to get published. A lot of us go to readings. A lot of us try to stay in the loop and know what the developments are. And the thing that I like about One Art, Mark, is that it gives you choices. Do you like this? Would you like to do that? Would you like to learn about that? Right? You could just click on readings or workshops or, shop.
Right. Yeah, that's a newer feature, a newer collaboration with the poetry shop.
Yeah.
I'd certainly love, I like that I started to do programming. I'd love to do more programming. That's, that's a complicated one.
Sure.
As of right now, One Art is, I guess you would say, by default, a for-profit venture. It's not a 501c3 nonprofit. But it's been a subject of interesting conversations with people about the pros and cons of a nonprofit and having a board and navigating all that, and how funding works and the frustrations. Yep. And it is interesting to see the emails that you get, from journals and presses that are dealing with that. And then, of course, we've had some, really, frankly, tragic issues at the federal level with funding. And then, more private institutions trying to step in. But it's gotten messy and challenging. There's a lot going on there, a lot to be said.
Well, Mark, let's have about 15 shows and just talk it all out. But I just want to thank you for coming on the Musical Innertube and sharing further about One Art and your other activities. And I, again, hope everybody will go and visit the site called oneartpoetry.com and see what's on offer, especially if you like the stuff. Don't have to be a genius, don't have to be anything. Just, visit One Art and see if you like the stuff that's going on and the stuff that is being published. And thank you, Mark Danowsky, Editor-in-Chief.
Thank you, John. Thank you for your time and for having me on the show.
The musical Innertube welcomes once again friend of the podcast, Lynn Levin, wonderful poet, fictionista, and teacher. And she's a big star in me new book, Poetry for Dummies, second edition. Lynn's poetry collections include The Minor Virtues, Miss Plastique, Poems for the Writing, Prompts for Poets, and Birds on the Kiswar Tree, translations of the Spanish poetry of Odi Gonzalez. Her great collection of stories, House Parties, was the theme of a previous musical Innertube episode. Go check that out. She teaches writing and literature at Drexel University in Philadelphia. And also check out her website, Lynn Levin Poet. That's LYNNLEVINPOET.com. Lynn, welcome to the musical Innertube. It's so nice to have you again.
Hi, John. Great to be with you.
All right, so let's talk about the prompts book, because that's what we focus on in Poetry for Dummies. And how did that come about? And tell our audience what prompts are.
About prompts, I find that students and workshop participants really love prompts. That they have plenty of material in their lives, but they need some kind of trigger, some kind of shaping device, some kind of springboard to get them started. And that's where prompts come in, and that's why they're so effective and why people like them. So a prompt could be, write a poem in the manner of an advice column plus an answer, which it gets to be very hilarious now because, I read advice columns, but people don't read print so much anymore, and that's where you often find those. So that I love that. It's a little antique, but it still works in some ways because I have I collected a bunch of these, cut them out, I distribute them, and people read them. Anyway,
well, for those of you watching on video, over Lynn's right shoulder are two wonderful books. The second edition of her prompts book, The Beautiful Pink. And next to it is this other second edition, which came upon me very much the same way. Someone somewhere said, "Oh, we should have a second edition," and they called me back and asked me to write it. Poetry for Dummies.
The first edition came out in 2013, and this was born of an idea that my co-author Valerie Fox hatched, and she said, we've been teaching writing, we've been teaching creative writing, we're poets. Why don't we write a poetry textbook? Is how she put it. And so we started to collect prompts, and we would classroom test them. So that was that was key. If it worked, then it would go into the book. So we collected them, and we did all the permissions and the rights and the permission stuff with the working poet. They're both working poets in there and students in there.
Sure.
And so we brought it all together, and Valerie it has contacts with a publishing company called Texture Press based in Norman, Oklahoma. Wonderful small press. And that the editor encouraged us, and we put it together, and we got some illustrations created, and it came out. And so we were very, very proud of it. We entered it in some contests. It won kind of like an honorable mention in one of them. And so more years pass, and then Valerie says, well, maybe we should do a second edition, because the Texture Press wanted, they liked, the first one did so well, they thought that we should do a second edition. So that meant really revamping it somewhat. I think there's probably 40% new material. And John, I'm very pleased that you're in there with that Dear Bee Lady poem.
Oh, yes.
And so we created some new prompts, and so the advice column prompt is the one that you wrote too.
Yes.
So we discarded some that didn't really work that well, and then we created a bunch of new ones.
So Lynn, if I were to ask you this question, I wonder what you would say. How has the poetry world changed in the last 26 years, since 2000? I mean, you're 27 or 8. You'd probably remember your earliest memories of the poetry world back around the turn of the century. I mean, people look at the poetry world and think, well, nothing could really change. I mean, this is just poetry, isn't it? But have you seen changes?
Well, I definitely see changes in the calls for submission. So that is one of the big things. There's a big focus on inclusion and diversity now. And so when you read the submission guidelines to literary magazines, I mean, almost all of them are encouraging and welcoming people of different ethnicities, different abilities. If you're disabled, if you're incarcerated, um, of different ethnicities, immigrants, immigrant poets, they're all asking for a big ingathering of submissions from people. So that focus on diversity and inclusion is real prominent now, and you didn't used to see that before.
And I
So
think that is a point that I hit on in Poetry for Dummies, is that especially in the end of the 20th and now all during the 21st century, you really do have a broadening of both the audience for poetry and searching for those who write it, because all sorts of people write poetry, and poetry it likes everybody. And there just does seem to be this movement towards which poetry is getting to look a lot like the United States of America, which is this big old combination of all sorts of different folks. I think it's nothing but good. I think it's brought us really fine new voices and new things to write about, new ways to think about it. Anything else that you see the last 26 years or so?
well, of course, it's the online world. Now you can many of the magazines are fully online.
Yep.
Some of them have a sampler online, so they may have a print magazine, but they have a little sampler online, and you can just gorge yourself on as much poetry as you want, um, Googling this and Googling that, and going to a lot of those websites that you talk about in the book. You share many of the leading poetry online daily newsletters where I love going on those things, because then I find out, well, who's the up and coming new poet from this ethnicity or that ethnicity, or
Oh,
um,
yeah.
I didn't know about that young lady before, but now I do, and then I like to share those in the classroom, because it worked by younger poets, and that the students relate to that. So I like getting my hands on what's new and breaking news, I guess, in the poetry world, and you get that in the online world, and then that's sort of like static reading. But then there are online poetry readings, Zooms.
Yep.
There are online workshops.
All these poetry events that you used to read on a piece of paper, thumbtacked to a kiosk in the old days. Now you can keep up with what's going on, and I agree with you, Lynn, that there are these feedback loops now where you can learn and send and be part, if you want to,
Mhm.
of poetry events of all sorts, including publication. And an example that I will give is I submitted a sonnet to an online joint called the Sonneteer. Got accepted, was published on my birthday, which was a nice birthday present. Isn't that nice?
Mhm.
Not only that, but the editor said, okay, I'm publishing your sonnet, but now you got to get on the social media and disperse it and do the Johnny Appleseed. You got to go on X, and it's up to you to get the audience and Facebook and stuff, which I did gladly. And what was great about that, especially on Substack, I might add, if you don't know, viewers, what Substack is, you ought to go see it. It's sort of interesting. Not everybody has to do it, but I think it's really fun. And the feedback has just been wonderful. You have this sense that people actually did read and they have ideas and reactions. And although you could get that back in the old days, it does seem as though these loops are in place now where A, it's a little bit more immediate, and B, you get to talk to a lot of people you would never meet before. I just like
Yes.
all that. I just like all that. Yeah.
Well, and you get read more, John. That's another thing. You get read more.
Yeah.
Um,
I hope so.
yeah.
Used to be two people. The person who published you and you
Yeah.
and your mom. You'd send your mom a copy of the magazine.
Lynn, Levin, this has been wonderful. And thank you for being part of Poetry for Dummies. Everybody, go read that part of the book where we talk about prompts and we give examples of the lovely prompts that Lynn and Valerie have created and the poets that respond to them and their poems. And they tell us about the whole process, which I'm very excited to have. It's very much of the moment. Thank you, Lynn Levin. And we'll have you back on the Musical Innertube before long.
Thank you, John Timpane. And yay, Poetry for Dummies.
The Musical Innertube is really happy to welcome Ernie Hilbert to this episode. Ernie was born in 1970 in the city of Philadelphia and educated at Rutgers and Oxford universities. He is the author of the poetry collections 60 Sonnets, All of You on the Good Earth, Caligulin, selected as winner of the 2017 Poets Prize, Last One Out, and Storm Swimmer, winner of the 2022 Vassar Miller Prize. He works as a rare book dealer in Philadelphia, and you ought to go visit him at www.ernesthilbert, that is E-R-E-N, sorry, do that again, www.ernesthilbert.com. So welcome, Ernie. So good to see you. And of course, we just saw each other at the big kickoff for the book. And you were such a big part of the book. You really helped it be better. And you're a great part of the party we had at Fergie's Pub. I would love you to start off by reading a poem of yours, if you would agree to do that.
I'd be happy to. John, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for asking me. I thought I'd read poem called Chimera Times. This appeared this year in March, the end of March, in a magazine called Cassandra Voices. And I'll say something that is apropos to what we may discuss later. When this magazine began, it's a Dublin-based magazine, and it began as a print magazine with a minimal web presence, and it was beautiful. Too expensive. So if you went to someone and said, you want to start a literary magazine? Price is no object. What would you like? That's what it was like. Okay. So it was large format, heavy stock, beautiful full color photographs and art and just all kinds of reportage as well as essays, fiction, some poetry. That he used to go around, do videos of himself going around to shops in Dublin and other cities in Europe saying, you need to carry this. I used to do that myself at the Oxford Quarterly back in the 90s. And I can tell you, you usually get a pretty icy reception. So the magazine still exists, but it is only online now because the overhead is much, much lower than these beautiful print magazines. But I continue to contribute to them when they come to me and ask for something. And so this is called Chimera Times from March 23rd of this year. You've lived beyond your relevance. Another song, another age. Another line while in a trance. Routine by prompt. An empty stage. The art lives past the life, and all they want is what you did when young. The bright first thing, the curtain call, when fireworks flew and bells were rung. Yet still, the audience appears. The props are now collectible, but all creations in arrears, and art is imperfectible. A shiver slices to your core. Your fans will get the eulogy before you end the trilogy you started many years before. A snowball with a granite shard. The encore to an emptied hall. The dance all done. The classics played. Back then, it was not so hard to be the major act. Enthrall your fans, at least the ones who stayed. A fad will rise, a bubble pop with the slightest touch. The greatest hits came out before you called it quits, and timeless love was set to stop. You won the day, but lost the war, remembered as the one who did that thing. You know, the thing he did, the thing he does for one more tour, the thing he did, the thing he did before.
Well, that's so wonderful. Thank you, Ernie Hilbert. So I'm wondering, I'd love to hear you talk for a couple of minutes of your personal experiences of whatever changes you've seen. And you're also free to say, well, it's pretty much the same as it ever was, just the means of change, whatever you want. I'd love to hear you.
Right. Well, I mean, one of the big bifurcations, as you pointed out, and this is a real dichotomy, is between the print and the online. And the two competing pressures with these since the 1990s has been the cost of doing a print magazine, laying it out, printing it, mailing it, what have you, versus the prestige that you still sometimes feel with a print publication in a nice magazine as opposed to simply being online, versus the ease of instantly publishing online, which of course also has led to it having a problem with prestige and status over the past 3 decades,
Right.
which has somewhat changed. But in a world where anyone could just post like this and the barriers are down, which can be a good thing, no one feels it's special to have appeared on the website that you created anymore, unless you do much more, make it something that feels important. So I'll give you an example. There's a major American poetry publication, and they have a board, and the board would meet at different places. And at one point, here in the building where I am, the company I work for used to be up on the 19th floor. We had more space, including a boardroom, a lot of space with a big table. You could seat 20 people easily around it. And so it took place there, and I stayed late at work in order to bring them coffee or tea or water or whatever they might want for their board meeting. And when it was over, they had left all their budgets on the table, and I went in to clean it up. And I thought, my goodness, wow, like it's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to put out 6 issues of this poetry magazine. And it's very prestigious, and it's involved in the growth and opening doors of many new poets and sustaining older poets over the years. But that's a lot. That's a big nut to crack, as they say.
Sure.
So you have to have money coming in, and it was generally coming in from people whose names you see on hospitals
Yes.
in the region and libraries and
Sure.
new L's of university buildings. It took that kind of extra wealth, as you say, to subsidize this.
Sure. The sugar daddy effect, I used to call it, which I know I know the same thing happened with newspapers. We had to move to online. And actually it helped us in one way because I could report on something and put it right up online instantly. So whatever the news was, it would get up and be accessible. So to me as a journalist and to us as a newspaper, that was very important. And I was one of hundreds of people doing that. On the other hand, when people got in the newspaper, they thought that was the greatest thing in the world, and they still do. They go, "Oh, I'm in the Inquirer." In other words, there's a certain amount of vintage prestige, if you want to talk, that the printed word has. And I, like you, have a little corner of my office which has a big stack of places where I just happen to have appeared over the years, and I made sure to go out and get copies if they didn't give them. Just there was something about it. Still is.
I hate to say it, I shouldn't admit this, but yesterday a magazine wrote to me, and they're new, and they said, do you have anything to show us that we might be able to publish? I thought, let me look more closely, see what I have available with that. So, oh, well, they have a Manhattan address and it's a print magazine. Maybe I'll roll out some of the better material than something that someone's doing on WordPress, where I'll still also help them out, even if they're not paying me. If I believe in what they're doing, of course, I'll find something for them, but it might not be the thing I just finished.
No, I get that. I totally get that. That'd be the first thought in my mind, that, boy, if this is going to appear in print, right? And what did we used to say? The fixity of print.
Yeah, absolutely. And so actually the ironic thing is now often even if it's a book, but definitely if it's a magazine or a newspaper, it can kind of just disappear and be hard to find for people. Whereas something you said on the internet 20 years ago is still sitting there.
Yep.
Right. It could still be up, as many celebrities and politicians have found.
Yep.
To their chagrin and great dismay.
And not a few poets, I might add.
Yeah. The people
including myself among them.
People say the internet is forever. I saw that t-shirt,
So it's immortal.
That effect. But back to my point.
Sure.
There are and have been for a while online only magazines that have real prestige and attract attention. Some of them then will do the reverse evolution and say, we now will put out a print annual because we have so much attention to what we're doing on the internet. So they reverse evolve back into print again. And so you see that. And so there are magazines like Bad Lilies is an English one.
Yes.
That is because of the quality of poets who are appearing in it, suddenly, at least among poets, begins to generate a buzz, which then generates a buzz outside of that hive. People can hear the buzz. And you say, well, it's beautifully designed, and I was just in a print issue of a magazine called for what's wrong with me here, it's from Sagging Meniscus Press up in North Jersey. The Clam, they call it, basically. Anyway, the cover, I posted that on Instagram, and one of the editors of Bad Lily said, hey, the artist we used to design our site also designed that cover of that magazine. And I was like, oh, great. It's all coming.
Yeah.
It's the Exacting Clam. Forgive me.
It's the Exacting
It's like a weird
Clam.
fiction magazine that also does some reviews and some poetry. Exacting Clam. So this artist wound up working for this print magazine in Montclair, New Jersey, and this online magazine in London.
Yes.
Okay. And so the look is the same. One's in print, one's online. So the prestige has begun to accrue to people who are doing online magazines really well.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah.
So that's one change. And then another thing that you can do, and I was explaining this to my friend, the poet Bill Coyle, on the phone the other day. I was like, you have to have a big internet presence if you want people to subscribe to the print.
Right.
So 32 Poems has done a very good job of getting people subscribing to the print by keeping the issues relatively cheap. They have a different artist each time, I think. It's interesting to look at, but it's small. It is what it says, Truth in Advertising. It's 32 poems, most of them only one page. You feel you can digest it. It's not a doorstop where it's like volumes 2 and 3 or whatever. Boom. You get that, but they have such an active online presence with additional interviews, with micro reviews, with previews of the print. They make it really easy to subscribe by going to the internet.
Yeah.
It's much easier to subscribe on a web page than it is to fill something out and mail it in. So again, it's flowing the other direction now, where you can have a really successful, highly esteemed print magazine that people know about because of your web presence. So there's neither of those things is something that happened in the last 10 years, though. What's happened in the last 10 or 15 years, which I'm not a part of because I was too old to really catch this, is Insta poetry,
right,
which has led to megastars who sell hundreds of thousands of books.
11 million for the one big poetry book. Who's the young
Ruby Kaur, for instance.
Yeah, that got picked up by a commercial publisher.
Right, so again, it flows the other way. So Instagram is a visual medium, mostly a still one. You can put videos, but it's mostly works well with still images. And so what that works as is a platform to show a page of poetry. One page, short poem, that's what works there. And of course, this took off in such a way for her, for some others, R.M. Drake, Atticus, who's an anonymous one, that publishers who are always looking for something new go to them and they publish the books. The books can sell tens or even hundreds of thousands of copies in print. I mean, I've been waiting for a flight in airports and you see like a wall of Rupi Kaur books, so
Unbelievable.
it went from a specific social media platform to traditional bound books, which is something that was sort of after my time. For a while I would post poems, but I would get, I only have, probably on that platform under 1,000 followers. So it doesn't go very far. You get 3 or 4 likes, that boat had sailed. Also, what I write is not really the right kind of thing to just pick up instantly on your phone and get it. So, then there's also, there's TikTok poets.
Yes.
That was a different medium.
Poetry talk is a thing.
It's audio visual.
Yes.
So instead of the still print image, so to speak, even if it's digital, Instagram was really a medium for the print still, the printed words. TikTok is audio visual. So it's better for performance poets than for page poets insofar as there's a distinction anymore. So that's one thing that's changed in terms of what gets recognized and what becomes popular. Another thing that's happened in the last 10 years is a big difference. So, John, you may remember, you probably mentioned this the other night from the stage. When you submitted poems, you would print them out. And before my time, you would actually use a typewriter. I at least
absolutely.
In the 80s, I could print on a dot matrix printer,
Sure.
But then you get stamps. So you have a self-addressed stamped envelope for the return. And then you get the address and the name of the editor, if they still exist at all, usually from Poets Market. Do you remember that book?
I sure do.
Yeah, so you have this big Poets Market.
Really big fat book that listed all of these different venues and publishers and editors. Yeah.
So you go through looking for one that might match what you're looking to do. Then you get all that stuff. Then you go to the post office. They weigh your package. For fiction, it's going to be heavier than for a selection of poems. And you have to write disposable copy at the top so that you don't have to pay for them to mail it back.
Right.
But please recycle. And then the worst, because people will say, yeah, this sure is disposable. So they send the rejection back. But I remember for all those years through the 90s, coming back to my cubby at college or my apartment mailbox and thinking, do I have a response from a magazine?
Yeah.
Some of them, just like now, could be a few weeks, could be a few months, could be years later, you get a response when they got through. And you've sometimes got a thing saying, yes, we'd like to publish you. And here's a $2 check.
Yeah. Or a copy of the magazine. Or absolutely bupkis. And that's what I was talking about on stage, is that several times, you probably had this experience. Someone says, oh, I saw your poem in Blort.
And you didn't even know.
And I had no idea. This was years later. And then I had to scrabble to try to find it.
Oh, that's happened, yeah.
Of course. And that's why I'd said that there were 1,000 points of light in the poetry world, but there was no network.
Right, exactly.
There was no feedback loop. There was no support, really.
And there's another side, which from your editorial life, which is, I for a while when I was living in New York, I was doing things for Long Shot magazine. I don't know if you remember them.
Yep.
But it was like, Charles Bukowski was in every issue while he was alive. He gave them pictures and poems.
Yep.
And Allen Ginsberg helped start it, and Mary Baraka helped raise money for it. And so it was Tom Waits. It was, Patti Smith. It was very cool.
Yep.
But there was a connection to that world of beatnik and all that kind of cool stuff, hippie era stuff. So we're going there. We have this is before recycling was easily done. So we have these giant plastic Glad bags. And you're going through, and we're sitting at a table with 8 of us. And if you see something you like, you put it in the middle for others to read it. So I'm going through one Sunday morning and I'm like, this is such a ripoff of Lawrence Ferlinghetti. It's just like Lawrence Ferlinghetti. It's such a ripoff. So I put a rejection in the thing and I threw it in the trash. And then when we're done and we're cleaning up, Danny Schott, the editor and founder, walks around. He's like, has anyone seen my submission from Lawrence Ferlinghetti? And I said, I think I threw it out because it was too much like Lawrence Ferlinghetti. So I had to go through all these bags and find it. So it was very, it was onerous to read submissions.
Yeah, it was a lot of work. And there was a real question of diminishing return for both sides, for both editors and writers. And I think it's different now,
They're good and bad, as with most things. So the good thing is someone actually read what was sent in.
That was very
Didn't
nice. Yeah.
sit on an online portal, essentially not really looked at.
Yeah.
You held a piece of paper in your hands, and you might say, everybody listen to this and read it out loud if you liked it. Real people were in a room considering it.
Yes.
Another good thing is there was at least a slight barrier to your seriousness, which was you're so committed to your poetry that you would find a place to send it, print it out, write a cover letter, get a stamp, get more stamps, go out in the cold or the heat or whatever, and get it mailed. Which made it, you couldn't just do it from your bed. You know what I'm saying?
You had to be committed. I could do like 5 episodes with you a little too easily. I want to thank you for coming on the Musical Innertube, and I want to promise you we would love to have you back.
I would love to come back, and I'd ask you to, when this goes live, nudge me so I can share it. And maybe every time I'm on a podcast, I talk a little too freely, and then it's usually like a delay. About 3 weeks later, I start getting some angry responses from people like, you arrogant so-and-so. So that's fine. I like doing podcasts. I'm happy to come back. Nudge me, let me know when it's out, and I can share it as well.
And now, a moment with John Timpane.
One thing we get a chance to do in the second edition of Poetry for Dummies, which is very exciting for me, is to make the point that poetry does not have to be purely solitary. It's great if it is, if all you want to do is read some poetry, or maybe write in a journal, or if you just want it to be a private pursuit, it's perfectly fine. It's a perfectly good way to do it. But it also has a social aspect to it. It's a very active world. There's all sorts of events. And if you're the kind of person who likes to be part of a community of people with shared interests, well, maybe poetry is for you. I mean, in the book, we run some pictures. For example, this is one of then Poet Laureate Ada Limon reading poetry in a national park, because as Poet Laureate, she did a national parks themed and nature themed initiative. This is the second one is a poetry reading group that just meets at a local library. The next one is on board an aircraft carrier where they decided to do a slam, and one of the service members is up there and reading from her own poetry. And the next one is a bunch of people milling around in a bookstore after a reading, and they're hobnobbing, they're talking about craft, they're talking about who they saw the other day, whose book is coming out. And it's all poetry stuff, but if you like that stuff, it's a great place to be, and there's some really nice people in that picture. And the next picture is of the Youth Poetry Slam in San Francisco. And poetry slams, I'm sure, are they're competitive public poetry readings, and they're still very popular all over the world. And the last one is yet another gathering. It's a reading where 7 poets read, and it's on the second floor of a bar / pub. Fergie's in Philadelphia. Hey, Fergie's, you go, baby. They've always had a great commitment to poetry. So poetry is an art, but sometimes it's also a gathering, a community, and that's something I think a lot of people miss that notion. That really, that kind of notion of a supportive group of people who are all interested in the same thing, it could be a nice place to be. 2 more notes. Mark Danowsky's website, One Art, its address online is oneartpoetry.com. That's ONEARTPOETRY.com. And when I talk to Ernest Hilbert, I call him Ernie throughout the entire interview. And I'm sure that he was wincing every time because I think he would prefer to be called Ernest. And I just call him Ernie the whole time. Why? Because I make everybody part of my family. You know, I'm the eldest of 9, and that's what I do automatically.
I think that I will never see a book as good as Poetry for Dummies. Little free verse.
Thank you, Don.
Thank you, John. And thank you for listening to the Musical Innertube.
Send us an email at musicalinnertube, all one word, @gmail.com.
Or log into our website, musicalinnertube.com, and click on the microphone in the lower right-hand corner to leave us a voicemail.
And while you're on our website, take a few minutes to listen to past episodes of the podcast, along with pictures and biographies of our guests, blog posts, and lots more.
Our thanks to virtual band Car Radio Dog for providing us with our theme music.